Hello and welcome to another episode of Lawbogadas with your co-hosts Missy Duarte and Connie Peña, two lawyers, Latinas, moms on a mission to bring you awareness and perspective about the issues important to you. I'm Connie Peña, licensed attorney in the state of Florida, practicing family law and family-based immigration, helping families and individuals transition into new phases of their life.
And I am attorney Missy Duarte. I am licensed in Florida and New Jersey. And my office is in New Jersey, where I specialize in personal injury law. I represent accident victims. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back. Please follow us. Our handle on all platforms is Lawbogadas. You can catch up with our latest episodes on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We are everywhere. You can send us a DM on Instagram, or you can email us at info@lawbogadas.com. Please send in messages, comments, ideas for new topics, things you want to hear about. We want to hear you. We want to listen. And that's what we're here for, to help everyone out, give guidance where we can, and awareness and perspective.
Yes. Slide in those DMs.
Slide in those DMs. So Missy, let's get into this episode. Why don't you tell everybody what happened and we can get into it?
Yeah. So this one is an interesting situation. This involves the law school in Columbia Law, where a law school professor curses out a student on a hot mic after she asked him to slow down the lecture. So this happened recently. So it looked like it was either after class or during some kind of break. The student approached, it was a female student approached the professor, a male professor, asking him to slow down the lectures for some international students who are also participating in the class, and I guess don't speak the language, that being English, of course, and couldn't keep up. To which the professor responded with, the assumption of the risk, which, if anybody in the legal field, you already know what that means, is you're just assuming the risk by participating in the class. Like, this is what happens. That he's more or less been teaching for 46 years, and he's never done that. He's never slowed down the class. So as the student is walking away, the teacher actually goes out of the image, out of the video that's being recorded, and you can hear the same voice saying, F you, which the entire expletive was said. So again, this was all captured on a hot mic, and there's video because the class was being recorded. So of course that is recorded on a cell phone or some other kind of device, and that's disseminated or about, and that's how we got our hands of it. So the professor is somebody who teaches evidence both at Columbia School of Law and Fordham School of Law, where he's a full-time professor, published author, pretty well-known guy in terms of his involvement in the legal community. And this unfortunate incident happened. So there's a lot of things, a lot of themes that kind of strike true and kind of alarm you and I, which is the reason that we wanted to talk about it. But, in hearing and understanding what happened, Connie, what are some of the issues that come to the forefront for you?
So, I mean, there's a lot of issues here. And I know that, if I recall correctly from watching one of the videos where this was posted, I think she made some kind of comment as she turned around, like nice comb over or something like that. And that's where he said the whole F you, right? Which on the mic, if I'm not mistaken, the class could hear it as well, no? Or that part I'm unclear on, to be honest.
Yes. So, what's interesting, that I didn't hear the alleged comment that she made back about the comb over. If there was one. You're not the first person to make that comment to me. I've watched this video a couple times, so I don't hear it, but I'm not saying that it didn't happen. But yes, because this is an ongoing lecture, and the video that this was recorded off of, it appears that somebody was watching this class remotely and it was being recorded. So that's where we're getting that information. But not discounting what happened, I just didn't hear it, so it's possible.
Yeah, and I believe that why we could hear it so well, like you're saying, is the hot mic, and so it's either it was available, at least to the people listening to that audio, that they could hear it. Perhaps not the entire class at the moment that's sitting in person, but it was definitely recorded, and that's why this came out. So going back to the issues, and I know that you and I talked about this before, and we've had a little bit of a back and forth on this. There's Number one is this idea of being invalidated in a power struggle, right? There's this dynamic of international students, how you're treated as an international student in the US versus the expectation of the US international student abroad, right? We have this hot mic issue, right? You know, this a lot of people getting in trouble for things that they didn't think anybody else was going to hear, but here we are. And just the dynamics of professionalism in general. You know, there's gender rules, there's all of these other issues. So
Yeah.
it's a lot to pack in, even though it's something that happened in the course of what, 30 seconds?
Yeah, it was very brief. But who knew that this was going to create a whole host of questions or a bunch of topics to discuss. So interestingly enough, in thinking about this more, this is actually a lot more, you said a lot to pack in, but it's also a lot to unpack.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right.
all
You
right.
know,
Well, where do you want to start? You want to start on the invalidation, the power struggles when
yeah,
it comes to okay.
let's talk about that. And something you and I were talking about before was, this idea of being invalidated by someone who is older, many times a man. And then when we add that extra punch of this is, I believe the student herself was the international student, or she was speaking on behalf of them, but needless to say, that was the situation, of being invalidated sometimes as a person who's quote unquote not from here. That's something that happens a lot that we have to deal with. What do you think about that in terms of you having experiences with that kind of scenario?
you know, I have been in that situation where I feel like my feelings haven't been invalidated, but when we're talking about this particular situation, I don't know if I necessarily see that as an invalidation of one's concerns. I get it. Should he have approached it from the point of like, I understand? I don't know, because like for me, law school is a completely different animal, is a completely different world. You are thrown into this world, if you will, where the rules are different. I always make it synonymous to like the paper chase, and given like we're talking about an evidence class, and evidence is typically a class that you take in your second year. And the paper chase, if anybody has seen that movie, is involves a student in his first year of law school, and trying to balance everything in his life uh as it relates to being involved in law school. But I very much make it synonymous to that experience. It's very cutthroat. It's very competitive, and I am not at all shocked by the way that he answered that question. Like, we're in the class, like everybody is treated the same. I speak at this pace, and like he may have not have said, I get it, like I get what you're saying. But I didn't necessarily see it as like a power struggle. I'm like, man, that's law school. Like that's how it is. And you have to figure it out. So I mean, I have been in situations where I feel like maybe my feelings haven't been acknowledged, but I just wasn't getting that from this particular situation, to be honest.
Yeah, and I see it just differently in the sense that I find myself very concerned all the time about watching my tongue and what I say and who I say it to. And I feel
Mm,
that women in general, and especially women in professional fields, and in particular where we're in a male dominated industry or field, we have that concern a lot more about we have to be careful with how we look and what we say and who we say it
mm,
to and what tone of voice we use and what words we choose to use. And we have to do these freaking mental gymnastics all day long. And
mm,
it becomes more commonplace, I find, for generally men that are older to just tell you, suck it up, move on. They can say F you and issue an apology. And I have no problem with the apology being sincere. That's not really my concern. I do believe his apology is sincere, but I feel like I'm not allowed to do that because I will be told that I am too emotional or too this or too that or calm down. And so that's more of where I see this invalidation of
mm,
of that part of it, where this automatic reaction to tell someone F you
mm-hmm,
is so inappropriate. If I told that to someone in my professional setting, I can only
mm-hmm.
imagine what kind of repercussions I would have. And
Oh
so
no.
that's
Yeah.
more so how it bothered me, because that's almost, this environment is also setting the tone
Mhm.
for what the field is and how we're going to have to deal with these things. So
Sure.
that's more so my issue, is that women get, and Latin women, fiery, quote unquote, get told a lot that we're a little too much, and
Mhm.
we need to calm down. And so um but other people don't seem to have that concern as much, I guess.
hmm No, I understand where you're coming from. I'm speaking just insofar as like the first part of the conversation. The whole using of the expletive was completely uncalled for. No, but I guess what my point is, you know, I didn't see it from that. I think again, we're talking about a very limited kind of interaction. We weren't there for the
Yeah.
whole class. Like there was something that happened. There was a certain amount of time that had lapsed up until this particular break, if you will, or recess or whatever was going on that prompted or, permitted students to interact with the professor in the middle of a, a break of some sort. I just mean from based off what I saw and based off what I've read and researched on this, like I didn't necessarily see it as a power struggle, but I see what you're saying because, the overall situation, would it have been interpreted differently if the professor was a female and the higher and the level, the standard that women in our profession are held to? I was told very early on in my career, like from a male attorney, you're going to have to work harder. That's just how it is. So,
Right.
we are held to a completely different standard. And yes, like very quite possible if it was a female professor that was behaving this way, then it wouldn't have been it would have been interpreted probably as a situation where she's being emotional, she's being too this, it's too much. But when it's the male counterpart, oftentimes it's more dismissive. So I understand what you mean now when you're talking about the invalidation uh point of view. Yeah, I
Right.
get
And
that
and
now.
I agree that law school is, it's meant to be tough. There's the what's called the Socratic method, which is
Mhm.
not used in other areas of education, which, to those of you listening that have not been to law school or not attorneys, what have you, the Socratic method is more so about making it harder, as I like to say, in the sense that you get picked on, you get called on, you don't know the answer, you get kicked out of class, right?
Mhm.
It's a little bit more cutthroat than just the general lecture where people are just listening and taking notes and move on.
Mhm.
And so, kind of with what I was saying about that, with the situation, um, asking a professor to slow down a little bit, and just in the way that they're speaking, I feel like it's an invalidation and a power struggle because of the person that's making the request. Because I know that when I'm really upbeat and really, antsy or nervous or something, sometimes I speak entirely too fast. And I'm told that on many occasions.
Mhm.
So I don't, when someone tells me, particularly in a professional setting, you're speaking too fast, you want to calm down to make sure that all the points make sense, that you are being concise. I don't take that with offense, saying, well, you assume the risk by listening to me speak, you know?
Mhm.
So there is an element of listening to your peers or students when you are a professor,
Sure.
and making sure that they're actually getting the most out of the class. And
Mhm.
I wholeheartedly agree that, the class can't just be taught in double the length. But it's more so the dismissive nature of too bad, so sad,
Yeah.
we're moving on, and that, and just how it's bigger.
Right. I mean, leading into the whole how that situation ended, look, like I'm leaning more so on like the professor's side at this point still up until this expletive is used because look, there's so much material. You remember being in law school. It's that, you get these thick old case books. You're reading hundreds of pages a night. There's so much material that there's only so much time that the professor has, and there's so much material that he has to go through or she in a semester before you get to finals time. And what is this? Could this have been handled differently? Yes, absolutely. What's interesting about today's time, like immediately what was alarming to me, I'm like, this is being recorded. This is awesome. Like this isn't something that I had. This is certainly not something you and I went to law school at the same time. This was not available. I think
Right.
we were kind of in this purgatory where we Some of us were using handwritten notes. We were just being allowed to use laptops, but certainly nothing was being
Can you
recorded,
not
which
make
that was
us sound
crazy.
like really old, Missy?
We're
When you're
not old. We're
like,
not old.
like got that
This
typewriter out to take notes in
listen,
class.
this is 10 to 10 to 13 years out. That's not
Yeah,
too long ago.
yeah,
So, I mean, but technology has come along so significantly and drastically in that time. Like, I'm thinking about it from his side. I'm like, well, you have a recorded lecture. You know, we have all of these devices that, you know, if you can't catch a lecture, you should be able to record it so that you can listen to it later on and catch up on everything. I get what he was saying. You probably like the way that I'm viewing this is you're on a break. It's like a 5 minute break. The professor's trying to like, you know, get himself caught up to whatever he's doing, the next class or the next section of the lecture that he's handling. And she comes up and he's like, no, because he's heard this question 70 million ways because he's been doing this so many times. And it's like, no, like assumption of the risk. You're in the class. This is how the class is taught. What should have happened? Listen, hear what you're saying. If you want to talk about it, let's talk about it after class. Or, you know, professors have office hours. If there's an issue, like please see me during office hours and we can address it, or send me an email and we'll coordinate like a time to speak about it during office hours so I could best assist you. Like there's other ways that we can gone about that, but you know, he seemed like he was fed up over something, and we immediately went left to. I mean, this is just how it is, you
right.
know. So I get it from the student's perspective where she felt, but I'm like, man, like that's kind of like I didn't disagree with him when he said that. I was like, yeah, like there's a limited set of time. He has to get through a certain amount of material. You either have to listen or you have to get very creative in terms of how you're taking down your notes. And oftentimes that for me, that was me taking down my notes and then comparing them with a colleague and going through it and making sure that both of us have all the material necessary so that we make sure we're ready for that midterm and most likely that one exam final that we're taking typically in an evidence class. So you know, it went a little bit crazy. I was trying to see it from both sides. But I don't know, man. I'm struggling with this one because I want to be able to side, but I'm seeing it more from the professor's point of view, mostly because I've been through the experience. So I kind of know that this is the realm, this is the world that we live in when you're in law school. It's typically a 3-year grind where very cutthroat, and this is the type of niceties that are exhibited to you. Like you got to figure it out, man. Got
Yeah.
to
But then
figure
we
it out.
also have that added twist of this was a request for international students. And the way
Mhm.
I interpreted assumption of risk based off of the particular request was not you assume the risk by taking like class and coming to law school. Generally, it's more so the dynamic of you should learn to speak English better if you're going to be here kind of thing, and I'm not going to accommodate you. You assume the risk by being an international student, whereas we do just know from whatever the internet, whatever you want to say, and just being humans and traveling that there's a different expectation when people from the US study abroad or go abroad of why don't you speak English to me? You should be speaking English to me when I'm here. And so that's kind of the other way that I interpreted it from hearing this is not so much the assumption of risk of being in law school, more so, if you don't like it, then you shouldn't have signed up for this program, which obviously, so that everyone is aware, you do have to pass certain levels of English proficiency in order to take classes as an international student. You can't just sign up without that. Let's just be clear with that. So there is a level
Mhm.
that you have to pass, and it is a standardized exam of the language. So, but those are the two dynamics that I took it as. I took it as, why do I have to control myself and how I speak all the time? And generally, it's men that get caught in this problem of the hot mic scenario that don't have to. And then the treatment of people that know 2, 3 languages being treated poorly because English isn't the one on the top, right? When
Mhm.
they've already met the requirements to be here, and the dismissive nature of that as well. But I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. I just don't see it in this particular. Again, I have a very limited amount of facts, so I'm having a hard time coming to that conclusion with you. I just don't see it that way. You know, if you were traveling and studying internationally, now again, I've never studied abroad, so my experience is limited. So I'm getting this off of if you have a student that's coming to the United States, an international student to study, and they, for some reason, um, they pass the proficiency exam. Yeah, like how are you supposed to be treated any you're not supposed to be treated any differently than anybody else. Everybody's on the same playing field. If I slow down the lecture for you, that's giving you a benefit. Is there another benefit that, student B, that's not the international student, that they could use? Then it becomes down this, you start thinking about this rabbit hole of like, okay, well, I'm benefiting you. Like, what do you need? Is it a visual presentation because you're a visual learner? And then what are you? You're an auditory person. And then you go down this whole rabbit hole and you want to accommodate everybody. But then how are you going to be able to do that? And how are you going to efficiently run the class? So I'm just having a hard time coming to that conclusion. But what you mentioned something very interesting. The expectations of US students when they study abroad, or, they're part of like an exchange program of some sort. What were the expectations of, because I know that's something that you did. Can you talk about your experience and what expectations were, expected of you when you did that or participated in that?
Well, I mean, generally, I feel as though there's different options, right? There's different programs. I, in particular, just did an exchange program, and the purpose is for you to learn more. And I do agree with you to a certain extent, Missy, about what you were saying before about this rabbit hole of making things easier, and then we have to make things easier for everyone in every single topic. And I don't want to misconstrue what I was saying, which was really more so about being dismissive of a person and addressing just explaining, hey, let's talk about this after class. Listen, these are resources available to you. Let's go down that hole because I'm not going to be able to do X, right? More so than let's give all of these opportunities and extra things, kind of how I felt jealous about my athletic student counterparts at the University of Miami that got access to tutoring and things that I didn't have a right to do, right? That I didn't have access to. So I don't mean more so about preferential treatment. I mean more so the dismissive nature of I don't want to hear it, right? But with this expectation of going abroad, I've found that sometimes people when they travel abroad want to be met with, you should be speaking English to me, or you should be aiding me in understanding you, as opposed to what I frankly believe it should be. I try to learn things when I've traveled to another country. I speak 4 languages, not fluently, but I do. And, I want to learn and I try. And I remember when I was doing my exchange program, when I was in France, I would want to speak to people in French and they would just automatically respond to me in English. And one day I literally threw my hands up in the air and I said, everyone speaks English here? And they're like, yes, we speak many languages. And, they were automatically speaking English to me because they respected what I was doing and they had the ability to speak to me in the language that was easiest for me, which was contrary to what I was trying to accomplish. But that's another situation. But I find that that's something that happens is not what I do, is that many people want to go abroad and want everything done in English, only in their language, when that's not where they are. That's not the country that they're in. And is that really the purpose of your travel, right? They have like Chili's and stuff, I guess, maybe in other countries, but I don't really go there when I'm abroad, right? So that's how I see it. But, going back to the issue at hand, Missy, do you find that in the realm of just, going back to who we are, right? Lawyers, Latinas, moms, that this is something that we need to be able to address generally, or do you find that this is like a one-time thing? What do you think about this as a whole? Because again, like you said, this is a very short snippet. This is like a 30-second exchange. We don't know anything about before or after. What do you think?
I mean, but which issue specifically? I mean, we touched on the international students, the lack of professionalism perceived by the professor's actions, the expectation of privacy. What do you mean exactly? As to which angle?
I mean, in terms of just professionalism in general and kind of the expectations that we have, right? Because like you said, you were told yourself, you have to work harder, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that from a professional realm, I think that again, from it being limited, I didn't take this as like a male female kind of situation. I could see how, in preparation for this, how perhaps the perception of how this went down with this particular professor may have been addressed differently, or would have been received differently had it been a woman that was like, F you, like, you don't like it, leave. Like, yes. So I do feel like we as women have to hold ourselves to a higher standard. We have to be very cautious in terms of how we communicate, whether it's orally, written, how we communicate, period. Whether we're doing it consciously or subconsciously, because, is this person, is she being professional? Is she being logical or is she being emotional?
Right.
Is she asking for something, by what she's doing? Is she asking for something by what she's wearing? Like, it's always something. We're always somehow as women communicating something, whether we're actually using our words or, through other means, at least as it's, you know, in my experience and how it's perceived by others. But yeah, I mean, there's a totally different expectation when it comes to men and women, in a lot of the realms, but especially in this professional realm. So I would not be surprised if this was interpreted differently if it was a female professor. But what about you?
Yeah, I think that, I agree with what you're saying, and perhaps it would have been a different exchange if it was a male student, like you're saying, we don't know. Obviously, neither one of these individuals really put a lot of thought in what they were doing or saying in this moment, and I can appreciate that. This was not meant to be some kind of analysis for other people to do, right?
Yeah.
But I think that we should be conscientious, especially when we are setting an example as professors, or we are employers, we are higher up on the ranks of whatever rank you want to talk about. There should be, on for everyone, no matter who they are, an awareness of how things can be interpreted, because I think that that's where, just like you and I have a different interpretation or a different maybe level of severity of the interaction. um I think that that's because it depends on who's listening and who's saying it, right? That
Perspective. Yeah.
perspective, dynamics, all of that has a very big effect on the end result, right?
Mm-hmm.
Two equals speaking to themselves in this way is not a topic of conversation. But the reason that there are articles published about it, and that this, went viral, so to speak, is because of that, is because there's a lot more to it. And it's something that people need to be aware of. I'm not pro like cancel culture, this idea, like, oh, he needs to be fired. That's not at all the situation. I think it's more so just how these are day-to-day experiences that start to
Mm-hmm.
accumulate and affect how we are able to grow in our careers, grow as individuals, and change how things run. Because I will tell you that I've had female judges speak to me in ways that are worse, maybe not with with cursing at me, but much worse than what this individual did. And it's a woman to woman kind of scenario. So it's
Sure.
always going to happen. There's always going to be inappropriate, um, banter, if you will, or exchanges. But I think that when you are in a position as a professor, you're setting an example and you're leading
Right.
these students down a path, right? And
Well,
I think
yeah,
that's where it needs to be a little higher.
that could have been, I
You've
mean, look,
assumed the risk by being a professor, right?
and I get that. Look, like, assumption of the risk. He comes in saying, no, I'm not going to do this. And, she, again, I didn't hear it, but it's alleged that she made this comment about like his comb over or his hair of some sort.
It's not
And
relevant
it's
or
met with
appropriate, but
correct. So she was 1000% wrong. And then he comes in with the FU, and that makes him 1000% wrong. But the problem here is that he's the professor.
right,
So he's the one in the legal community. He's the one that's licensed. He's the one that's, is held to a higher standard. And that to me was an opportunity for him to kind of like see me after class and we can
right.
discuss it. And not to admonish her, but to be like, look, like, this is my angle on this. I've been teaching 46 years. I can't slow it down. I have only X amount of time. And, if there's an issue, come talk to me during office hours. But that was completely inappropriate. And, in the real world, when you graduate law school, you pass the bar and you're appearing before a judge or you're working with an adversary, opposing counsel on a case, there's going to be many times where, a judge doesn't rule in your favor and you're not going to like it. There's going to be many times when you have negotiations or you have conversations with opposing counsel and you're not going to like what they say. So to me, that was a very big opportunity that was could have been taken advantage of in a good way, in a positive way. But unfortunately, it went left and it turned into this very negative experience for both the student and the professor. So, I mean, learning experiences all around. We definitely want to hear about, have you all, as our listeners, have you been involved in these situations, whether it's in law school or, another like educational type of scenario or environment, or just at all where you've been put something like this? Do you know of somebody like this? Hit us up and tell us about your experiences, because that's certainly something that we want to know more about. I think the biggest emphasis with the work that we're trying to do with our podcast here at Lawbogadas is really just shed light on things that aren't normally discussed, and get more comfortable with discussing these oftentimes uncomfortable topics.
Yeah, I agree. And being able to have these conversations, because fortunately that's what we've lost a little bit of sometimes, is being able to have a discussion and, address our points and have things progress, whatever it is that we're talking about, right? So
Right.
we'd love to hear your stories, what's happened to you. Have you been in a situation like this, whether as the receiver or, the person who was caught saying something, or just maybe you weren't caught, but, you did something that you didn't handle well. And, people need to be able to talk about these things, get better. We need to improve our civility and, set better examples. So
Yeah. And what were your perspectives on this video? Hopefully we can share the link with you all so you can watch the video for yourselves if you haven't watched it, and give us your perspective on it. How did you see it? It's always interesting to know someone's understanding of it, or what they took away from it, because perspective is everything. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about being who we are, and being from different backgrounds and experiences and cultures, and learning more about your perspective. So hit us up on via email at info@lawbogadas, or you can follow us on Instagram. Definitely follow us if you haven't already on Spotify and Apple. Hit that like button, subscribe, and hit us up. Let us know what you want to hear. Tell us how we're doing. We're just happy that you all are here and are following us on this wonderful journey that is Lawbogadas.
thank you, Missy. It's been fun. Until next time, next
Thank
week at our Cafecito Club, Mondays at noon, when we're releasing our new episodes every week, Mondays at noon, with that afternoon coffee, ese cafecito tan rico. We'll see
Yeah.
you then.
Yeah. See you then. If you haven't joined our Cafecito Club, what's going on? Get on that Cafecito Club. See you at Mondays at noon. Can't wait to hear from you guys.
Bye.
Bye.